HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. defending recent firings at HHS, as well as his previous comments on vaccines. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us more on what might be Kennedy's most fiery hearing yet.
We need unbiased, politics-free, transparent, evidence-based science in the public interest.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made his case for the Trump administration's health care agenda in front of the Senate Finance Committee on Thursday.
We at HHS are enacting a once-in-a-generation shift from a sick care system to a true health care system that tackles the root causes of chronic disease.
Most of the hearings that Kennedy has testified at have been fiery, and this one was no exception.
That was your promise,
No, I
Kennedy,
didn't. I never
mine.
promised that I was going to recommend products with which there is no indication.
When you said...
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies.
Parents and schools and teachers all over the United States of America who deserve so much better than your leadership.
You're just making stuff up, Senator.
I'm not
You're just making stuff up.
During the hearing, Kennedy faced criticism about the recent removal of CDC Director Susan Menarez, as well as some of the other changes that the HHS has implemented this year.
The largest cuts to American health care in the history of our nation.
In June, you fired every member of the well-qualified panel that was charged with recommending vaccines to the CDC.
Kennedy defended his decisions.
We are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at the CDC. They did not do their job.
Kennedy also responded to criticism about his statements on COVID vaccines and their effect during the pandemic.
We have to acknowledge that there was a cause. We acknowledge that there was a benefit. We can't quantify either one because of the data chaos at CDC, and that's all I'm saying. And they think I'm being evasive because I won't make a kind of a statement that's almost religious in nature.
Outside of the hearing, Senator Elizabeth Warren says that she wants to see recently removed CDC Director Susan Menarez testify in front of the Senate and tell her side of the story.
And explain exactly what happened when Secretary Kennedy walked in and said he wanted her to pre-approve getting rid of access to the COVID vaccine and who knows what other vaccines.
While the hearing was going on, Senator Rand Paul responded to accusations that Kennedy is sowing doubt about vaccines. Paul says he thinks the establishment is the one creating the doubt.
If the establishment keeps telling me things that are incorrect, that's where doubt comes from.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The Trump administration plans to appeal a federal judge's ruling against billions of dollars in funding cuts to Harvard University. Here with me now to discuss this ruling is U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon. Secretary Linda McMahon, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us. A judge just siding with Harvard University over the funding cuts aimed to address anti-Semitism and foreign influence, really, Chinese infiltration on their campus. What is your reaction to this?
Well, we certainly will appeal this ruling. We don't think that ruling is going to stand. I think that one of the things that Harvard had pushed back on in their case was that this was sort of an abridgment of the First Amendment. That's clearly not the case. We believe that college campuses should be a place for the free exchange of ideas, but we do believe that students should be safe in their environments on student campuses, and that universities should abide by the Title VI and Title IX in their programs. And so we're going to hold them to it, and we'll appeal this ruling. And I feel pretty confident we'll win.
Madam Secretary, is there a way that the Department of Education can help colleges to protect their research from these foreign threats, especially from countries like China that are so deeply embedded? And are universities really, kind of turning a blind eye to these risks and not doing their job?
Well, I really can't speak to what's been happening on college campuses relative to how they're managing their research, with foreign entities. I think that is one of the things that we want to make sure that universities, are doing, that they are complying with the regulations for their research grants, and that is something I believe that the Justice Department might take further look at.
You were just today with the First Lady at the White House spotlighting AI, artificial intelligence, in our education system and how it sort of weaves together. How can we really make sure that students are thinking on their own and not solely relying on AI? And what type of safeguards and guardrails do you think really need to be put in place?
Well, clearly we do have to have guardrails when we implement AI, for sure. But that, I think, in terms of students outside of school, when we're looking at children, I think parents will help put some of those safeguards in place. But also our schools, I think, are going to have a responsibility to make sure that the AI that is being used in those schools is being used properly. And I've seen it used in some schools already for as independent tutors, and it really does help with the programming. I'm looking forward next week to going to the Alpha School in Austin, Texas, which is one of the foremost schools in the country for its utilization of AI. They use it for about 2 hours, first thing in the morning, to really teach their curriculum, and then they have other programs in the afternoons. I'm really anxious to see how that works. It was a pleasure to be with our First Lady at the White House today as she talked about the AI initiative and how much of an impact that it is going to have, not only in K through 12, but also our universities and in life in general. So just as we, were a little bit hesitant, I think, when the internet first came around and how we had to be guarded, with that, I think we need now to look at AI as an incredible tool that can be used to advance our education and our creativity, and our thought process. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we're going to do that.
The school year is obviously just beginning for most folks throughout the country. You've been touring around the country. Less than a month ago, I was at an event, you were there in Colorado with the nation's governors. It was a bipartisan gathering of governors from each state, red states, blue states. And it was, there was a lot of civil discourse. They were engaging you. Talk to us about how the Department of Education is working toward President Trump's commitment to return education authority back to the states, and how you're working with all 50 states in the country to do so.
Well, I am working with all 50 states, and that's why I am going to tour different schools in all 50 states. I've been to micro schools, I've been to charter schools of different kinds, I've been to public schools, and I've been to religious schools. I think it's very important as we return education to the states and control of, the full control of education to the states, as the president believes it is where it should be, as do I, because I think the best education is that closest to the student. But I want to see what kind of schools are operating at maximum efficiency and how the programs in those schools are ones that should be emulated at other schools across the country. So it's really developing a handbook or a toolkit, if you will, of best practices, so that if one state is doing something incredibly well, as we've seen with the progress in Louisiana with their reading scores, some of the best in the country, by returning to basics in reading, using the science of reading, and they've had great success. So let's emulate that in other states. And so if we can take those best practices and show it to governors and educators in other states, then that's a really helpful tool to be able to return education to the states so that all states then can be successful.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. today testifying on President Trump's 2026 healthcare agenda. Joining us live to discuss what went down is Jonay Wartel, Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, along with Chet Love, Republican strategist and founding partner of the Cornerstone Group. Great to have you both with us. So Secretary Kennedy was asked about how he would ensure that decisions are based solely on science and not politics, and how patients and doctors can ultimately count on the CDC. Let's hear a clip.
Senator, I would point this out. Right now, there's only 10% of children are complying with the CDC's recommendation on COVID boosters. Only 15% of healthcare workers. So Americans have lost faith in CDC, and we need to restore that faith.
Chet, we'll start with you. Do you think RFK Jr. today, by making things more transparent, is helping to rebuild trust in the CDC?
Absolutely. This is what the American people voted for at the end of the day, was to have a CDC that was transparent and not forcing mandates on the American people. I mean, we saw this absurd fight between Secretary Kennedy today and Elizabeth Warren, where the Democrats are just making up facts and making up issues to try to attack this administration for doing the will of the American people.
Jonah, could transparency be what is needed for those who remain skeptical of the CDC's recommendations, such as some vaccines?
Well, this was a bipartisan firing squad, makes no mistake about it. There is a reason why RFK is one of the nominees that had the slimmest confirmation margin. His policies, his stances, him being a vaccine denier and a conspiracy theorist is exactly why many Democrats were so concerned with him taking this post as a cabinet secretary. He has, for months now, since he took this post, continued to push conspiracy theories and push the president's agenda when it comes to health and health policy. Now we have a situation where even though there is transparency, his leadership still poses a public health risk because so many people, the CDC director, others in that agency, have now decided that they can no longer maintain these roles because of his leadership. And so what we have is a crisis of leadership. And while there can be transparency during these hearings, there still aren't the kind of answers in leadership that the American people deserve.
Chet, some Americans might argue if you have both parties mad at you, might be doing something right. The secretary was also asked about how changes to the HHS rules could affect access to vaccines in pharmacies. Let's take another listen.
If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people vaccines.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication.
Chet, what do you make of this argument?
I mean, again, as I've said this before millions of times, the Democratic Party is rudderless, and they're trying desperately to cling on to anything to try to get things back in order. Republicans are out raising them in terms of funding. They have a better message, and they're really delivering to the American people. The fact that Elizabeth Warren is trying to make a claim that the CDC is prohibiting, or the FDA is prohibiting individuals from getting access to the vaccine is the most absurd thing in the world. The reality is that the COVID vaccine is still accessible by people. What Elizabeth Warren is saying is it's not free, and we're not doing free giveaways to vaccines that aren't necessary for the entire population anymore. And so again, this is another example of just how Democrats are out of touch with reality and completely out of touch with the facts.
Jonah, what are your thoughts, and what do you make of the idea that there's a difference between what's called established science and the scientific establishment, that basically what the data shows could differ from what's recommended?
Well, listen, we know that RFK and his leadership has denied science. And when you have somebody who is leading a public health organization agency who is openly questioning the validity of vaccines and playing partisan politics with public health, that is a very dangerous precedent. Now, he has on many occasions throughout his tenure of leadership questioned whether vaccines should be available, if they should be circulated widely, if they are effective at all. And so when you have someone who is a spokesperson for public health playing partisan politics, then you have a very dangerous precedent that is set. So he has openly denied science. He's continued to create cynicism around public health standards, and that is the real challenge that we're facing.
Okay, we have to leave the discussion on the vaccines and the hearing today there for now. I want to talk to you both about education. Northwestern University President Michael Schill resigning today. This comes after federal funding freeze following his Title VI investigations and amidst arguments that he failed to protect Jewish students on campus. Jonay, is his departure, it is really the latest in a string of university leaders resigning. Do you think that there will be significant cultural changes on campuses going forward from a lot of these upheavals?
Well, listen, the Trump administration continuing to politicize research dollars is now a part of their playbook. And this is something that the president of Northwestern is the latest victim of. But this, as you mentioned, happening over a series of universities throughout the past couple of months. Research funding is about public health. It's about making sure that America is leading the way with these sorts of scientific research that can present cures and do other services to the American public. And now we have Donald Trump, weaponizing these research dollars for entities and organizations that need them and waving these partisan flags. Now, I think we should all be concerned about what the future of research should be in all of these different universities, many of whom are high research activity, if we have a president that is going to shut it down because he takes issue with the politics of the president. That is a very dangerous precedent to set.
Chet, what are the Trump administration's goals here, and are they achieving them?
Yeah, the Trump administration's goals are to follow the law. And again, the fact that Democrats continue to use this rhetoric is absurd. They didn't complain when Obama froze federal funding for institutions in 2017. Again, I have to explain this to people. I'm a lawyer, and I like looking at the law. Title VI has specific requirements for the federal government to investigate these type of claims. And so Obama's done it, Trump has done it in his first term, and now he's doing it again. These students on campus were saying that, hey, we didn't feel safe. This isn't about whether or not you agree with what Israel's doing in Gaza. This has everything to do about the safety of students on campus. And those are two completely different things. The Trump administration isn't saying that you can't demonstrate against Israel or that you can't agree with the Palestinians. What it's simply saying is you can't harass students on campus. You can't chase them around campus. You can't block entryway and extraway to Jewish events because you disagree politically with what's going on in the country. That's what the Trump administration is investigating now, and it should, just like any other claim that gets made under Title VI by students.
Jonay, Wartel, Chet Love, appreciate you both.